Picture a city so vast it could hold nearly 1 million people, swallowed whole by the jungle in a single lifetime, not conquered by a foreign army, not erased by plague, destroyed by the very kings who built it. This is the forbidden story of an empire that ruled Southeast Asia for 6 centuries and vanished almost overnight. Its capital held temples larger than anything on earth at the time. Its rulers claimed to speak for the gods themselves, and yet, beneath the golden towers, something rotten was growing, a hunger for power, so consuming it would bury an entire civilization in stone and silence. The people who lived here left no warning, no final message, just empty streets, cracked reservoirs, and thousands of carved faces staring out from crumbling walls, watching nothing. Farmers who once fed 1 million mouths starved within a generation. Engineers who built miracles of water and stone were forced to build monuments instead. What happened inside those palace walls, in the final years, is more disturbing than any invasion could have been, because the enemy was never outside the gates. The enemy was on the throne, and by the time anyone realized it, it was already too late. The empire was Angkor, the beating heart of the Khmer civilization, hidden today beneath the forests of Cambodia. At its height, its capital sprawled across an area larger than modern-day Los Angeles. Its temples, including the legendary stone city, now known as Angkor Wat, were built to prove one thing above all else, that the king who ruled here was chosen by heaven itself. Every ruler who took the throne inherited more than a crown. He inherited an obligation to build something greater than the king before him, bigger temples, taller towers, longer canals. It was not a tradition, it was a trap, because behind every soaring spire stood thousands of laborers dragged from rice fields to haulstone under a merciless sun. Behind every reservoir was a population whose survival depended entirely on water systems only the state controlled. The kings called it devotion. Historians now call it something else, a slow-motion catastrophe, engineered by the very people sworn to protect their citizens. For centuries, the system worked. Barely. Rain fed the reservoirs. Reservoirs fed the rice fields. Rice fed the empire's endless construction. It was a fragile machine, built entirely on the assumption that nothing would ever go wrong, and be maintained only for as long as every king respected the balance his ancestors had struck with the land. But in the shadows of the royal court, something far more dangerous than drought was already spreading. Betrayal. And the first cracks weren't found in the stone walls of the temples. They were found in the whispered conversations between princes who wanted the throne for themselves, in the silence of advisors too afraid to speak the truth, and in the growing distance between the palace and the starving fields beyond its walls. Historians studying the collapse found something chilling. The kings of Angkor didn't fall because they ran out of resources. They fell because they refused to stop consuming them. Inscriptions carved into temple walls reveal a court obsessed with legacy over survival. Each new ruler ordered construction projects larger than the last, diverting labor away from maintaining the very reservoirs and canals that kept the empire alive. Engineers who once maintained a water system considered a marvel of the ancient world were reassigned to build monuments instead. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tree ring records and satellite imaging, uncovered by modern researchers, show something the ancient inscriptions never admitted: a devastating cycle of extreme droughts, followed by catastrophic monsoon floods, striking an infrastructure the leadership had let decay for generations. The system built to survive nature's extremes had been stripped of its resilience by the very rulers meant to protect it. But nature alone did not destroy Angkor. Nature simply exposed what corrupted leadership had already broken. Court records hint at something even darker: internal power struggles between rival claimants to the throne, each willing to weaken the state further rather than see a rival control it. Some historians believe sabotage of shared water infrastructure occurred during succession conflicts, leaders willing to starve their own people rather than lose power to a competitor. Meanwhile, the population that once numbered in the hundreds of thousands began quietly disappearing from the capital, not through a single dramatic exodus, but through a slow, grinding abandonment, families leaving one by one, then in waves, as the promise of the god kings failed them. By the time later rulers tried to reverse course, there was nothing left to reverse. The reservoirs were silted, the fields were barren. The trust between ruler and ruled shattered beyond repair. The temples remained. The people did not. What those inscriptions never say out loud is that every decision leading here was made by a handful of men on a throne, convinced their word was law. When Angkor finally fell, there was no single day of reckoning, no trial, no execution, no dramatic downfall captured for history. The kings who caused the collapse were never punished in the way we imagine justice should look. Some rulers simply vanished from the record, their names quietly dropped from later inscriptions, as if the empire itself wanted to forget them. Others shifted the capital entirely, abandoning the ruined heart of their civilization for a smaller, more defensible city, near what is now Phnom Penh, leaving behind the greatest architectural achievement in the regions. History to be reclaimed by root and vine. The ordinary people paid the true price. Farmers who had fed an empire were left to fend for themselves in a landscape stripped of the infrastructure that once sustained them. Entire communities scattered into smaller, fractured kingdoms, their unity destroyed, along with the reservoirs that once bound them together. For centuries, the jungle did what no army could, swallowed the temples whole, hiding the evidence of what corrupted leadership had done, until French explorers rediscovered the ruins in the 19th century, and the world was forced to ask, how does a civilization this advanced simply disappear? The answer still echoes today. Modern historians point to Angkor as a warning-made stone, a case study in what happens when leadership prioritizes monuments over the people who sustain them, when infrastructure is sacrificed for image, and when those in power silence the warnings of those who serve them. Governments today studying water security, climate resilience, and institutional trust still reference Angkor's collapse because the pattern that destroyed an empire 800 years ago, unchecked power, ignored warnings, and leaders who valued legacy over survival, has never actually gone away. It has only changed its temples, its titles, and its excuses. Empires rarely die from a single blow. They die slowly, from the inside, one silenced warning at a time. Angkor teaches us something we still refuse to learn, that power without accountability doesn't just corrupt the powerful, it corrodes everyone beneath them. The kings who ruled this empire believed they were building something eternal. Instead, they built the terms of their own disappearance. Every civilization carries the same quiet risk, that the greatest threat was never the enemy at the gates, but the silence inside the walls. The advisors too afraid to speak, the warnings too inconvenient to hear, the leaders who mistake control for wisdom. So we're left with a question that outlives every empire that has ever fallen. When your own leaders stop listening, how long before the silence becomes the collapse? Tell us what you think happened in those final years. And if this dark history unsettled you the way it should, stay close. There are more forgotten warnings buried in the past, waiting to be uncovered.